There's a principle recorded over a century ago that explains why some people seem to attract what they want, while others keep repeating the same cycles indefinitely. The Kybalion calls it the principle of vibration. Everything vibrates, and more stable vibrations pull weaker vibrations into their rhythm. It works with pendulums on the same wall.
It works with people in the same room. It works with you right now as you listen to this. If your internal frequency is erratic, swinging between desire and doubt, hope and fear, you're not transmitting, you're receiving. And whoever transmits with more clarity determines what happens around them. Not through force, through induction.
This mechanism operates continuously, and the only variable is whether you use it or get used by it.
What comes next describes how this dynamic works and what it takes to stop being a receiver and become the dominant frequency.
There's an assumption most people carry as absolute truth, that they are autonomous individuals making independent decisions, navigating a world of circumstances that exist separately from them. This assumption is comfortable, and that's precisely why it's rarely questioned. But what would happen if this premise were reversed? What if, instead of reacting to an external world with a will of its own, you were actually witnessing a reflection, a faithful and inescapable projection of what you hold internally? The Kybalion, a Hermetic text published in 1908 by the Three Initiates, opens its exposition with the first and most fundamental of the 7 principles, mentalism. The statement is direct: the all is mind, the universe is mental. This assertion establishes that the foundation of reality is not matter, not energy in the conventional physical sense, but consciousness. If the universe is mental in nature, then what you hold in your mind is not a commentary on reality. It's the force that shapes it. Neville Goddard, one of the most direct exponents of this view in the 20th century, translated this understanding into a practical method he called the mirror of consciousness. The image is simple. When you stand before a physical mirror, the reflection has no autonomy. It cannot smile before you smile. It cannot move independently. The reflection is compelled by its very nature to faithfully reproduce whatever stands before it. Goddard teaches that external reality works the same way. The circumstances, the events, the people around you, none of this has independent initiative. The world functions as a reflective surface, and what it reflects is the image you hold of yourself. Think of it this way. The mirror in your bathroom doesn't decide how you're going to appear in it. It simply returns what it receives. Reality operates under the same rule. This inverts the common logic of cause and effect. Most people look at circumstances and conclude, this is how things are, therefore this is how I feel. The actual mechanism, according to this understanding, operates in the opposite direction. This is how I feel, therefore this is how things must configure themselves. The mirror has no choice. It must adjust. But there's an additional layer that makes this dynamic even more determining when applied to human relationships. Goddard developed a concept that describes how this law of the mirror manifests in interactions between people. Everyone is you pushed out. The term may sound strange at first reading, but its implication is direct. The people around you are not acting from a center of will separate from yours. They are, consciously or not, playing roles that confirm the conviction you hold about them and about yourself. How does this work in practice? The person who possesses the most stable internal conviction, what Goddard calls a state, functions as the one who sets the rules of the environment. Others, whose internal definition is more diffuse or wavering, automatically assume the roles necessary to confirm this dominant conviction. There's no conscious resistance in this process. There's not even awareness that it's happening. The reorganization occurs at the subconscious level, before any rational decision is made. It's like a conductor in front of an orchestra. He doesn't play any instrument, but he determines the rhythm, the tone, and the intensity. The musicians respond to his command, not through coercion, but through attunement. Whoever has the clearest signal leads. Whoever doesn't, follows. The Kybalion describes this phenomenon through what it calls the art of mental transmutation. The Hermetic text teaches that mental states vibrate, and that minds with stronger and more stable vibrations transfer that frequency to more passive or unstable minds. This isn't about forcing anyone. It's not about convincing with words. It's something more subtle. When two pendulum clocks are placed on the same wall, eventually their pendulums begin to swing in the same rhythm. The stronger one pulls the weaker one into its cadence. This happens between minds in the same way. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt a heavy or light atmosphere? Have you noticed how certain people seem to alter the tone of an entire room simply by being present? Some people walk into a tense meeting and, without saying anything extraordinary, the mood shifts. Others walk into a calm environment and, within minutes, there's conflict. This is not coincidence. It's the visible manifestation of a law that operates continuously, whether you recognize it or not. The question that arises then is not whether this dynamic exists. It operates regardless of intellectual acceptance. The question is, what position do you occupy in it? Are you emitting a clear, defined, and stable frequency? Or are you living in a reactive state with no fixed signal, being reorganized by the imagination of firmer consciousnesses around you? Most people live in the second state. Not because they're incapable, but because they were never informed that an alternative exists. They react to circumstances, believing that circumstances are the cause. And by reacting, they repeatedly confirm the pattern. The mirror keeps reflecting the same image because no one changed the expression in front of it. Leadership in reality, not social or positional leadership, but leadership over what materializes, belongs to whoever holds the most stable and intentional frequency. The mirror of reality must by law adjust to the new image presented. This is not a distant possibility. It's a rule in operation right now. The only variable is whether you use it consciously or get used by it. If reality functions as a mirror, reflecting what you hold internally, an inevitable question arises. What exactly do you need to do to change the reflection? The most common answer, and the most mistaken one, is that you need to try harder, want it more intensely, desire it with more force. Repeat affirmations until exhaustion. Visualize obsessively. This approach, popularized by various personal development currents, starts from a premise that seems logical. If you want something hard enough, you'll eventually get it. But Neville Goddard points to a structural flaw in this logic. Intense effort, obsession, burning desire, all of this carries a specific signature, the signature of someone who doesn't have. You don't make an effort to breathe. You don't ardently desire your heart to beat. You don't repeat affirmations to convince yourself you're alive. These things are natural for you. They're facts. And it's precisely this naturalness, not intensity, that determines what manifests. Goddard teaches that each person functions as what he calls an operant power, not a power in potential, waiting to be activated by some special technique, a power in constant operation, shaping reality at every moment, whether you realize it or not. The question isn't whether you're creating, you are. The question is what you're creating, and from which internal state. The Kybalion presents the second Hermetic principle that illuminates this dynamic, the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The Hermetic text teaches that the difference between matter, thought, and spirit is not one of nature, but of speed. Everything is the same substance vibrating at different frequencies. A stone vibrates, a thought vibrates, an emotion vibrates, and that which vibrates consistently, without oscillation, imprints itself on reality with more force than that which vibrates erratically. Here's the problem. Most people live in a state of constant oscillation. In the morning, they feel hope. In the afternoon, doubt. At night, fear. They desire something intensely for a few minutes, then spend hours imagining everything that could go wrong. This oscillation has a technical name in the biblical tradition. The Apostle James called it double-mindedness, the divided mind that, according to him, should not expect to receive anything. Not because there's punishment, but because the signal being emitted is incoherent. It's like trying to tune into a radio station while spinning the dial non-stop. You don't pick up anything clearly. The Kybalion describes the antidote to this oscillation through the concept of polarization. The text teaches that the student of Hermetic principles can learn to polarize themselves at any desired degree on a vibratory scale. This means that, instead of being dragged around by moods, circumstances, news, and other people's reactions, the person learns to voluntarily fix themselves at a point on the scale and remain there, not through emotional repression, not through pretense, but through sustained choice. Goddard translates this into even more practical terms. The state. A state, in his terminology, is not a passing emotion. It's a stable position of consciousness, an assumed identity. When you assume the state of already being what you desire, you're not pretending. You're occupying a specific vibratory position and remaining there long enough for the mirror of reality to be compelled to reflect this new image. Think of someone who just received news of a promotion at work. How does this person feel? How do they walk? How do they respond to the small frustrations of the day? There's a lightness, a security, an absence of anxiety regarding that specific matter. Why? Because, for them, the matter is resolved. There's nothing to achieve. It's already been achieved. There's nothing to prove. It's already been proven. This is the feeling of the wish fulfilled that Goddard describes. And it's this feeling, not the effort to obtain it, that reorganizes reality. Anxiety is always an indicator. When you feel anxiety about something you desire, that anxiety is not neutral. It's a vibratory statement. It says, I don't have this, I need this, I don't know if I'm going to get it. And the mirror, faithful to its nature, reflects exactly this message back. More absence, more need, more uncertainty. Excessive effort operates the same way. When you need to repeat an affirmation 200 times a day, the repetition itself reveals doubt. Someone who knows they're alive doesn't need to repeat I am alive to convince themselves. Obsessive repetition is the symptom of an unassumed state. It's the attempt to force open a door that only opens from the inside. Effective transmission, the kind that actually moves the mirror, happens when the desire stops being a desire and becomes an internal fact. When the sensation of I want transforms into the sensation of I have, not as a forced mental exercise, but as a natural residence. You live in this state, it becomes your psychological address. And when this happens, the external world has no alternative. It has no mechanism to resist a stable image. Just as the reflection in the mirror cannot argue with you, cannot negotiate, cannot decide to show something different, external reality reorganizes itself to confirm what you've assumed internally as true. Not through magic in the childish sense. Through law, the same law that makes the stronger pendulum pull the weaker one into its rhythm. The same law that makes stable vibration prevail over erratic vibration. Naturalness wins over intensity because naturalness is the language that reality recognizes. Up to this point, the understanding may seem abstract. Reality is a mirror. You need to hold a natural state, stable vibration prevails. But how does this translate into daily interactions? When you're facing another person, your boss, your partner, a stranger on the street, what exactly is happening between you? Who's influencing whom, and why? The conventional answer would say that each person is an independent agent making decisions from their own will, and that the interaction between two people is a negotiation between two separate wills. Sometimes you convince, sometimes you're convinced, sometimes you dominate, sometimes you're dominated. Life would be then a constant struggle of opposing forces. Goddard presents a completely different structure. For him, there's no struggle. There's no negotiation between separate wills. There's only a screenwriter and a cast. And the screenwriter is always the one who holds the most stable conviction about what's happening. He calls this the law of transmission. The idea is direct. You're not competing with other minds. You're transmitting, and others are receiving. The question isn't who's going to win the struggle. The question is, who's transmitting and who's merely reacting to someone else's transmission? Think of a theatre play. The protagonist enters the stage with a clear intention. He knows who he is, knows what he wants, knows how the scene should unfold. The supporting actors may have their lines memorized, may have rehearsed their movements, but in the moment of the scene, they respond to the tone the protagonist sets. If he enters with authority, they adjust to that authority. If he enters hesitant, they fill the vacuum. The protagonist doesn't need to force anyone to do anything. He simply sets the tone, and the others organize themselves around that definition. Reality, according to this understanding, works like that stage. You are the protagonist of your experience. The people around you, all of them, are the cast. They're not there to compete with you for the lead role. They're there to confirm the script you're writing internally. The problem is that most people don't know they're writing a script. They think they're just reacting to someone else's script, and by thinking that way, that's exactly what happens. The Kybalion describes this mechanism through the art of mental transmutation. The text teaches that one who understands the Hermetic principles can not only govern their own mental states, but also affect the mental states around them, not through imposition, not through argument, through induction. The mind that vibrates with more stability and clarity naturally influences minds that vibrate more weakly or in a scattered way. This isn't theory, it's basic functioning. It happens in every human interaction, all the time, whether the participants realize it or not. Goddard anchors this transmission in a specific point, the declaration I am. When you say or feel, I am this or I am that, you're not describing a condition, you're establishing a frequency. I am prosperous transmits one thing. I am always getting the short end of the stick transmits another. And the cast around you, the people, the circumstances, the opportunities, organizes itself to confirm what you've declared yourself to be. But here's the trap that catches most people. The declaration that counts is not the one you make out loud, nor the one you write in an affirmation journal. The declaration that counts is the one you hold internally, often without realizing it. You can repeat, I am confident, 100 times a day, but if your predominant feeling is one of inadequacy, it's the inadequacy that's being transmitted. The cast doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your actual frequency. This is why some people seem to have constant luck, while others seem to attract problems wherever they go. Luck is not chance, it's consequence. The lucky person holds, consciously or unconsciously, a stable expectation that things work in their favor. And the cast of reality, people, events, coincidences, organizes itself to confirm this expectation. The unlucky person holds the opposite expectation, and they receive exactly what they transmit. Coincidence in this context is not a random phenomenon. It's the mechanism by which internal assumption externalizes itself. You assume a state. You transmit a frequency. And then, through paths your conscious mind didn't plan and couldn't predict, circumstances reorganize to confirm what you assumed. The right person shows up, the opportunity arises, the door opens, not because you forced it, because you transmitted, and reality, like a well-trained cast, responded. What happens then when you don't transmit anything defined? When your conception of yourself is wavering, unstable, oscillating according to circumstances. You give up the protagonist role. You stop being the screenwriter and become an extra in someone else's drama. Someone around you, perhaps someone you don't even know well, is transmitting with more clarity, and you, without realizing it, adjust to their script, not by conscious choice, by the absence of your own transmission. The law of transmission is not something you can turn off. It's operating now, as you listen to this. The only choice available is between transmitting consciously or being reorganized by someone else's transmission, between being the protagonist of your own drama or a supporting character in someone else's. The stage is set, the cast is ready. The question is, who's writing your scenes? Everything said so far presupposes proximity. The mirror reflects whoever stands before it. The protagonist influences the cast present in the scene. The more stable mind induces the more scattered one when both share the same space. This makes intuitive sense. But there are records, within this tradition, of something that doesn't fit this model. People who transformed relationships with someone on the other side of the world. Situations that resolved without any contact. Changes in someone's behavior that couldn't be explained by any direct influence. If transmission depends on presence, how do you explain effects that seem to ignore distance? Goddard answers this question in a way that requires a pause. He doesn't offer a mechanism for influence at a distance. He questions the very notion of distance. For him, the separation between you and any other person, whether they're in the next room or on another continent, is not a reality. It's an appearance, an illusion of the senses. The Kybalion anchors this view in the principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. If the substance of everything that exists is consciousness, then the division between me and the other is not structural. It's functional. It serves to navigate daily life, to organize experience, but it doesn't describe what's actually happening. Goddard takes this to its ultimate conclusions. He teaches that there are no separate consciousnesses interacting with each other. There is one single infinite consciousness that is, at this moment, dreaming itself as many. You, the person next to you, someone in Tokyo, someone who lived 300 years ago, all would be like different characters within the same dream, apparently distinct, functionally separate, but at the root, expressions of a single dreamer. To understand what this means in practice, think of an ordinary dream, one of those you have at night. Within the dream, you encounter people. You talk with them. They seem to have their own will. They react in ways that surprise you. Sometimes they disagree, sometimes they help, sometimes they threaten. While the dream lasts, these people seem completely independent. But when you wake up, what do you realize? That all those people were you. There was no one out there in the dream. The friend, the stranger, the enemy, all were productions of a single mind dreaming itself as many things at once. The separation was real within the dream. Outside of it, it never existed. Goddard proposes that waking life operates under the same structure. The people you encounter while awake are no less vivid, no less complex, but the separation you assume exists between you and them would be just as illusory as the separation between you and the characters in your nighttime dreams. One single dreamer, dreaming itself as everyone. What does this change in practice? If you want to transform a relationship with someone, say a person in another city with whom you have no contact, the conventional approach would be to find a way to reach them. Call, write, travel, do something in the external world that crosses the distance between you. But if distance is an illusion, if this person exists within the same consciousness as you, then the point of intervention changes completely. You don't need to reach them out there. You need to modify the image you hold of them in here. Change the way you imagine them. Revise what you feel when you think of them. Internally, hold the relationship as you would like it to be, not as it has been. This internal change, within this understanding, is not preparation for a future action. It is the action itself. It is the intervention at the root. Goddard uses a term to describe where this operation happens, the fourth dimension. For him, the fourth dimension is simply imagination, the space where images form, where scenes are lived internally, where states are assumed before they exist in the visible world. This dimension would be the cause. The three-dimensional world you perceive with your eyes, hear with your ears, and touch with your hands, this world would be the effect, the shadow projected by something that happened first, somewhere else. Imagination doesn't know distance. You can, right now, form the image of someone on the other side of the planet. You can see them smiling. You can feel a conversation with them. You can hold the sensation of reconciliation, of partnership, of affection. There's no spatial barrier to this. There's no travel time. The image forms instantly, the moment you summon it. If imagination is the cause and the physical world is the effect, then what you hold in this internal space doesn't remain contained there. It unfolds, it finds paths, it reorganizes circumstances your conscious mind didn't plan. The person changes, not because you forced them, but because you altered the only thing that can be altered, the representation of them within the consciousness that dreams everything. This places weight on the way you imagine people. If everyone you know exists as an image within you, then what you hold regarding them is not private, it's not neutral. Imagining someone as hostile would be planting hostility in the only soil that exists. Imagining someone as an ally would be planting alliance in that same soil. Distance reveals itself then as a condition of the dream, not of the dreamer. And the dreamer who recognizes this discovers a form of influence that doesn't depend on physical presence, on spoken words, or on visible actions. It depends only on what is held in the silence of imagination, where there is no far or near, only what is maintained with clarity. There's an assumption almost no one questions, that the past is closed. What happened, happened. Words spoken cannot be unspoken. The offense received was recorded. The failure is engraved somewhere, unchangeable. You can learn from the past, you can accept it, you can try to forget it, but you can't change it. This is the conventional view, and it seems so solid that most people never stop to examine it. But this view depends on a specific premise, that the past exists as a physical fact, recorded in some objective substrate, independent of the consciousness that registered it. If this premise is true, then yes, the past is stone. However, what happens if the premise is wrong? The Kybalion opens with the principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. If the universe is mental in nature, then nothing in it exists as a physical fact separate from consciousness, not the present, not the future, not the past. The past, within this understanding, is not recorded anywhere outside the mind that registers it. It exists as an impression in consciousness, and consciousness is living, malleable, and changeable. Goddard took this implication to its ultimate conclusions. He didn't teach that you can reframe the past, or change your relationship with it, or heal the memory of old events. He taught something more radical, that revision alters the past itself, not the memory of the past itself, because there is no past outside of consciousness. The event and the record of the event are the same thing. He called this practice the pruning shears of revision. The image comes from gardening. A gardener who wants healthy fruit doesn't allow dead branches to remain on the vine. He cuts them. He removes what's dry, what doesn't serve, what drains energy without producing anything. Pruning is not destruction, it's cleaning. It's making space for something new to grow. Consciousness works the same way. The day's events, conversations, encounters, news, conflicts, leave records. Some of these records are neutral or nourishing. Others are like dead branches. They carry frustration, resentment, fear, and a sense of defeat. If you go to sleep with these records intact, you're solidifying them. And what solidifies in consciousness seeks to repeat itself in experience. Today's conflict, if not revised, tends to reappear tomorrow in some form. Bad news accepted as definitive tends to attract confirmation. Revision interrupts this cycle at the root. The Kybalion offers the technical basis for understanding why this would work, the principle of vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Memories vibrate. The memory of a humiliation carries a specific frequency. The memory of an achievement carries another. When you mentally relive a negative event, you're not just remembering, you're vibrating at that frequency. You're reactivating the pattern. And sustained vibration is what reality reflects back. Revision is the direct application of what the Kybalion calls mental transmutation. The Hermetic text teaches that mental states can be transmuted, not eliminated, not repressed, but transformed into other states. The difference between one state and another is not one of nature, but of vibration. A painful memory and a harmonious memory are made of the same mental substance, vibrating at different frequencies. Transmutation consists of altering the frequency and thus altering the state. Goddard translated this into method. The process. Before sleep, you review the day's events in your imagination, not as a passive spectator, merely remembering. As an editor, you identify the scenes that didn't match what should have been, the dialogue that soured, the harsh response, the news that weighed heavy, and you rewrite them. In your imagination, you live the scene again, but with a different outcome. The conflictual dialogue becomes harmonious. The harsh response becomes respectful. The bad news transforms into good. You're not fantasizing an alternative reality for escapism. You're intervening in the only place where the past actually exists, in consciousness. And by rewriting the record, you rewrite the fact. The revised version becomes what happened, because there is no other version stored in some objective vault. Only what consciousness holds exists. Think of a day marked by an argument with someone important. The rest of the day may have been ordinary, but the argument lingered. You went to sleep thinking about it. You woke up feeling the weight. In the following days, the relationship changed. Coldness, distrust, tension where there was none before. The argument lasted 15 minutes. The impression it left colored weeks, months, sometimes years. Revision would have worked like this. That same night, before sleep, you would review the scene. But in your imagination, the conversation would take a different turn. The harsh words wouldn't be said, or they would be said, but would meet a different response. The tone would change. The outcome would be different. You would live this version with maximum sensory realism, hearing the voices, feeling the environment, inhabiting the scene as if it were the only one that existed. Goddard recommended this practice daily, not as a sporadic ritual, but as hygiene. Just as you remove the day's residue from your body before sleep, revision removes the residue the day left in consciousness. You prune the dead branches before they become a permanent part of the structure, and you wake up with a lighter vine ready to produce different fruit. The past, in this view, is not a sentence. It's a draft, and the pen remains in your hand as long as you're breathing. Revision cleans what has passed, but there's a second practice, complementary, that plants what hasn't yet come. If revision is the shears that prune the dead branches, this second technique is the seed deliberately placed in the soil, and the moment to plant it is not just any time. There's a specific window, a particular state of consciousness, where the seed penetrates deeper and germinates with more force. Goddard called this state SATS, state akin to sleep. It's that moment you know well, even if you've never given it a name. The body is relaxed, heavy. The mind is still conscious, but has already begun to release the reins of the day. Thoughts no longer obey rigid logic. Images arise more easily. You haven't fallen asleep yet, but you're not fully awake either. It's the border, the threshold. Why this specific state? Because in it, the barrier between the conscious mind and the subconscious thins out. During the day, the conscious mind functions as a gatekeeper. It filters, analyzes, doubts, and questions. When you try to imprint a new reality in full wakefulness, the gatekeeper frequently blocks the entry. This isn't real. This isn't going to happen. Who do you think you are? The gatekeeper has good intentions. It wants to protect you from illusions, but ends up preventing new seeds from reaching the fertile soil. The subconscious is that soil. Goddard describes it as the womb of creation. Everything that manifests in your experience was first accepted there. The subconscious doesn't judge, doesn't analyze, doesn't distinguish between real and imagined. It simply receives impressions and works to externalize them. It possesses means the conscious mind doesn't know about, connections that rational thought cannot map. Once an impression is accepted as true in the subconscious, forces begin to move to bring it to the surface of experience. The Kybalion illuminates this process through the principle of mentalism. If the universe is mental, then there is continuity between your individual mind and the mind that sustains all reality. The subconscious is not an isolated compartment inside your skull. It is the interface between you and the all. When an impression penetrates deep enough, it doesn't remain contained within you. It accesses the mental field that connects everything. This is why the subconscious possesses means the conscious mind doesn't know about. It operates at a level where the separation between you and the world hasn't yet crystallized. The principle of vibration adds another layer. The state of full wakefulness vibrates at one frequency. Deep sleep vibrates at another. SATS, this threshold between the two, vibrates at an intermediate frequency, more subtle, closer to the dimensions where reality is still malleable. It's as if, by slowing down the vibration of the conscious mind without falling into complete sleep, you gain access to a creation studio that stays closed during the busy day. The technique Goddard prescribes for this moment is simple in form. You construct a short scene that implies the fulfillment of your desire, not a scene of the desire being pursued. A scene that could only happen if the desire had already been realized. If you want a promotion, don't visualize the interview. Visualize a friend congratulating you afterward. If you want to heal a relationship, don't visualize the difficult conversation. Visualize a peaceful embrace that presupposes reconciliation has already happened. The scene should be short, specific, and loaded with sensory realism. You see, hear, touch, and feel. And then you repeat this scene in a loop while in SATS, not with effort, not with tension, with the naturalness of someone remembering something that already happened. The conscious mind may doubt the next day. The gatekeeper will return to work. But in that moment, on the threshold of sleep, the impression has already been made. The seed is already in the soil. The Kybalion describes mental transmutation as the art of changing states. What happens in SATS is transmutation applied to the future. You take the current state, I don't have this, and transmute it to, I have this, imprinting this new frequency directly into the subconscious. Once imprinted, this frequency begins to propagate. The body acts differently, decisions change, opportunities that were always there suddenly become visible. People reorganize around you, not through magic in the childish sense, through law. The imprinted vibration seeks correspondence in the world of forms. Goddard was emphatic. What you carry into sleep, you deliver to the subconscious. Most people fall asleep replaying worries, fears, and the day's conflicts. Without knowing it, they're planting exactly what they don't want to harvest. Conscious practice reverses this. You choose what to plant. You use the window of SATS to imprint the scene that implies the fulfillment of the desire. And then you let go. You let the subconscious work with the means it possesses. The cycle completes itself like this. During the day, you hold the state of already being what you desire. At night, before sleep, you revise what needs to be pruned and imprint what you want to see flourish. The transmission becomes clean, the signal becomes clear, and reality, which never had a choice but to reflect what you hold, begins to reorganize. Every change begins with understanding your role as a co-creator, and the only path to connecting with this divine intelligence is through meditation. We've developed a set of audio tools to help you access this elevated state of consciousness. To learn more and get immediate access, click the link on the screen or in the comments. If this video made sense to you, write in the comments, "This made sense to me."